Welcome to the Andrew Price Podcast, the podcast where I talk about habits, techniques, tricks that artists can learn, essentially everything that doesn't fit into a tutorial in this podcast. So I answer your video questions, which you can send to blenderguru.com/podcast question. Before we get to the meat and potatoes of the podcast, there was unfortunately a little character assassination that took place last week over Twitter. And normally my approach to these sort of things is to just ignore it, lean on the ropes, let them retire from exhaustion and hope it goes away. But this one actually got pretty far. It was like a thread that collectively got, thousands of likes on Twitter. There was hundreds of retweets. There was a Blender artist thread. There was a 4chan thread, believe it or not. And then the person who started it all made her profile private, which I don't know why. But anyways, it got pretty far. Now, what kicked it all off? What started the character assassination? Like most of them, difference of political opinion. So I weighed in on just a little political matter that happened a few weeks ago. Just a little one, little hornet's nest by the name of the Capitol Hill riots. Thought I'd just stick my hand into that dogfight and just see what happens. Like when it's raining, I look out the window and I go, hey, it's raining. And then if the next day it's raining again, I go, hey, it's raining again. So when I saw the Capitol Hill riots, I went, yeah, it's riots. It's just like last year when the Portland people were rioting to get into some building for multiple nights in a row. I was replying to somebody else, and that was sort of my opinion on the matter, which sparked this big debate and outcry, which is fine, by the way. I welcome that. What I should have made clear from that tweet, which it is not, understandably, is that I support anyone's right to protest anything. Doesn't matter what it is. If you want to stand in a park and hold a placard and scream into the clouds that 5G gives you coronavirus or something, be my guest. I support it, and I actually wouldn't want to live in a country that doesn't allow that. But if at any point you find yourself picking up a brick or Googling how to make a Molotov cocktail, you've made a wrong turn. And that's it. Not only because it's harmful to society, obviously, but even it should be harmful to your movement, because assuming you live in a democratic country, people get to vote on it in the next election. So they get to choose between chaos and order. So it's all around bad idea. So that's my opinion on the matter. So some people debated. That was fine. I learned a lot, and that's usually how these sort of things go. But one person did not want to go to that level. So instead, they, in private, just started looking through everything I've ever said, taking screenshots of tweets, and sort of compiling it all into a big thread to really defame my character and damage my reputation in the hopes that people would move on from me to other creators. That was the spiel. Like, I'm just trying to help people find other creators. That was the idea, whilst defaming me at the same time. And then it was sort of tweeted out to 26,000 followers in the MoGraph community. This person is a tutorial creator herself. I think she makes paid tutorials, something like that. But anyways, it went out and a bunch of people saw it, and yeah, some people were mad, and then there was a thread on Blender artists and 4chan and yada yada. Now, 90% of what was posted was honestly pointless, right? I'm going to be truthful here. When I read it, I thought, what's the big deal? And then I read the comments, and there were a lot of people that were sort of piling on, but also people were like, there's a lot of filler stuff here that you could have discussed with Andrew privately. Things like me saying that restricting who you hire on skin color or gender will always result in less qualified personnel, because you can't start with a wide talent pool, then make it smaller and magically turn out better candidates from nowhere. Me saying that sexual allegations scare me because even if proven false, the label is sticky and hard to remove. That was problematic. One of them was actually me arguing against someone who was racist. So I'm feeding them back their own thoughts. So I'm saying like, so your solution is to round them up and ship them back to Africa? ? But that person has now been suspended from Twitter. And so you can just see my replies to it. If you were to argue that I was a bad person, wouldn't this evidence work against you? So anyways, like I said, there's a bunch of stuff in there that just didn't make sense. And I think most people agreed on that. There was really only two things that anyone seemed to care about. And one of them was a tutorial that I made in 2017. It was the flag tutorial. And near the end, I'm talking about a flag, and I say flag. I'm surprised I haven't said fag. I missed that word. Now, that'd be pretty damning evidence if I stopped right there. I miss using a homophobic slur, but I went on to explain. I don't miss using it to demean someone and to use it the way what the word actually means. I miss having a punchy word, like a word that you could hit your friends with like we used to in school. It was a punchy. I'm not saying we need a word that is that. I'm saying we need another punchy word. And that's what I said. Now, anyone who grew up in the 90s or early 2000s knows this to be true. We used fag way too much, right? We used it. I don't even think we understood what it meant. I don't believe adults ever explained that to us. It was just a word that was hurled across the playground by idiots. And then later on we knew what it meant. So you could possibly take what I said to mean that I miss using the word. But the video has been up for 4 years. It's got nearly 400,000 views. And up until now, I have seen 0 complaints about it. It doesn't have a higher dislike ratio to likes. 0 complaints about it. So either all those people are wrong and, it was truly egregious, or maybe it's that when you edit 22 seconds out of context and then post it to Twitter with the title homophobic slur and edit in zoom cuts on my face when I've said a bad word, you could potentially pull the wool over a few people's eyes and make them believe that what I said was truly dangerous. But reading the comments, yeah, there was a lot of people who was like, this is disgusting. And then there was other people that was like, you're not even listening to what he said. So, I trust my audience and I respect my audience enough to not treat them like children. So I'm not going to edit it out. I'm not going to take down the video. I'm going to leave it up, and worst interpretations be damned. Okay. And the final thing was a bad joke tweet from 9 years ago. And I'll just read it out now. From 2012. I'd like an international ghetto talk day so white kids can shamelessly say the N-word and get it out of their system for a year. Now, it was a joke, but albeit a very poorly worded one. Very, very bad joke. Falls flat. And it was made worse by the fact that I actually spelled out the N-word, which I now know is not a good idea. Now, the worst interpretation you can take from that is that I miss using the word in a derogatory way. But anyone who knows me personally or anyone who's watched a lot of my stuff knows that that is not possibly true. It was just a bad joke. And you might not think that it matters that it was from over a decade ago, but if you've ever kept a journal and read something that you wrote even a week ago, you'll be surprised at how much we change. And along with ourselves changing, there's also society changing. The other day I was watching Wreck-It Ralph, that was actually made in the same year I made this tweet. And there was a scene in it where the little girl is like showing her home and she curls up into these little blankets and she goes, and then I wrap myself up like a little homeless person. And I thought it was funny. It was hilarious. And then I thought, that joke wouldn't happen today. I don't think many people would make that joke. And that's because times have changed and people could take that to mean you're making fun of homeless people. Right? But the fact that Disney made that joke a year ago shows that the lexicon of accepted words changes over time as well. Not that this word has changed, It's always been a bad word, but I think we can all agree it has definitely gotten more serious over the last decade. And not that that excuses it, of course, but we can all agree that jokes that were acceptable can be taken out of context a lot more today than previously. I personally believe that you should be able to joke about anything, but at the same time, I also know that free speech goes both ways, right? And if you ever say something that's stupid, idiotic, and really offensive, then you're going down for it, right? Right? And I'm not a comedian, and I risk a lot by throwing in these little tidbits. And by the way, some people were wondering, like, why does he even joke about this stuff? Like, why even joke about, fag in the middle of a flag tutorial, right? Like, it seems like he's got this seething hatred that's like bubbling inside of him, and it just sort of escapes like Tourette's, and he just can't help but like let it out, right? The reason that I do this, that I throw in little jokes into my tutorials, is that this is part of my, what would you call it? My principles of teaching, right? Is that when you are learning something as a student and you're watching a tutorial online and the person is formal and robotic and serious, it is stressful because it feels like the stakes are so high. And if I slip up, I'm going to ruin it. And it's like, oh, it's stressful, right? That when the creator throws in a little joke or even just an off-topic comment, like about a car that's driving past, or like this word sounds like that, or haha, something, I don't know, this color reminds me of this. It just helps like lower the tension in the room. And so that's why I do it. That's why I said, oh, I'm surprised I haven't said fag. And then I talk about that, right? Okay. It's not because I wanted to when I started the tutorial. It's because the word came to mind. I almost said it. It came out. And then I talked about it. And that's kind of the reason, okay? Now, obviously, I can slip up, say something really stupid, and that'd be the end of me. I know that it's risky business. But I'm aware of that, and hopefully I have I give enough context usually that things won't be taken out of context. But anyways, so obviously I'm not very happy about this kind of thing. I've talked about it before. I don't agree with sort of ostracizing someone for difference of opinion, which is why I'll add here, I don't want anyone to harass this person. I actually think that, when you like degrade someone or shame them, you're much more likely to actually validate their opinion that they're up against a nasty person or opponent or group, rather than change their mind in any way. You can and should definitely voice your opinion when you see this stuff online that you disagree with. The people that stood up for me, thank you. I know that you typically stand a lot more, you stand to lose a lot more than you do to gain by speaking up for somebody who's having the stones thrown at them. So I really appreciate those people. A lot of people sent me private messages saying I disagree with this. I got a lot of those, and that's great, thank you. But it's also really great when people speak up publicly, because I know you stand to lose a lot and you still respected free speech and discussion enough to enter the ring, so to speak. But yeah, do it civilly. Just don't insult people, don't degrade people, don't shame people. That's my mantra. I just want everyone to come together around the campfire and sing Kumbaya or Imagine by John Lennon. What a world that would be. Right? But that's it, guys. So that's the off topic for this week of the podcast, or this fortnight of the podcast. Now we're actually going to finally get into the meat and potatoes of this podcast and answer our first question sent in by a user. Let's kick it off. This one comes from Bruno. Bruno does something. All right, let's play.
Hey Andrew, I'm Bruno, a multimedia design freelancer from Argentina. I'm 21 years old. I've just graduated and I'm looking to get a job abroad at a studio or an agency. How do I position myself when I'm really interested in many things and I can do most of them, but none of them at an expert or really advanced level? Thank you very much.
Good question, Bruno. So you've just graduated and you're good at a lot of things, but you're not an expert in any one of them. How can you position yourself? And I think really you're asking the very common and very good question, which is it better to generalize or is it better to specialize? And TLDR, short version, it's better to generalize. Okay, so when it comes to pursuing a career, the different paths that you take, it is true that depending on where you intend to work, it is better to be a generalist or whether it's better to be a specialist. The smaller the studio that you intend to work at, the less people it has, the more a generalist is needed. And the larger the studio it is, like Blizzard with 2,000 people or something, the more a specialist is needed because you need to fit into a pipeline. You need to be good at one little thing. You need to be good at modeling. So you're going to take the concept art, you're going to do the modeling, and then that's going to go to a rigger and you're going to do that. You don't touch anything else. It's just that because there's so many people that's built around it. That's all the niche little field you go to. A smaller studio with like 2 or 3 people, you're literally working next, like bumping shoulders with your boss who's working on the same table as you. And he's going to say, so we need some marketing material. Can you put together like a little poster? And then the week after that, he's like, can you do like a little animation? And then the week after that, he's like, can you do like a cute little mascot character? Because we want to put one in the ads. You're going to be doing so many little things. And the more generalist you are, the better at a smaller studio. So despite that though, I would say the more beginner you are, the more earlier you are in your career, the better it is to be a generalist and the more you should focus on that. So let's talk about that. The quote that you've all heard and everyone is familiar with is jack of all trades, master of none. That is probably the most misquoted quote in history. I don't know of any other quote that has been misquoted to mean the opposite of what the actual full quote is, okay? If you don't know the full quote, it's jack of all trades, master of none, comma, though oftentimes better than master of one, which is the opposite of what everyone's remembered it as. I remember actually in the interview I did with Colin Levy that's on YouTube, I brought that up to him and he's like, what? Are you serious? How did we all get that wrong? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how that was so misquoted so many times. It's saying that, yeah, it is often better to be a jack of all trades because it's often better than a master of one. So I think the reason for this and the why, like I've listened to so many interviews with athletes, successful business owners, actors, everything, all of them have so many unique interests, it blows your mind. It's like a snowboarder would be interested in painting and a chef is interested in piano and a piano player is interested in programming. They all have the most diverse interests and it's probably a big part, maybe just their brain is like constantly hungry for something else. Maybe that's a big part of it. But it's also speaking from firsthand experience. When you learn other things, you realize how applicable it is. Like when I learn lighting, I realize like the science of light and the inverse square law, like that affects like how I set up my lighting today for this talking to the camera thing. Like I know that by having the camera, like the light closer to my face means the darker the wall is going to be behind me versus if I pull the light way out there and then set the exposure a lot higher, it's just going to make the wall as bright as I am. So you learn something that seems like I only learned that for 3D art so that I could make my 3D art great, but it's now applicable to this. My wife was doing cake photography the other day because she makes cakes and it's her thing. And she was like, oh, how do I make it so it looks like really nice, but then like the background is dark? And I'm like, let's just bring it closer to the window. So she like moved it a little bit over. I'm like, no. Inverse square law. Every doubling of the distance from a light source is a 4x less light hitting that spot, which sounds crazy. Like that can't be true. It is true. It's the inverse square law. So when you bring your the cake, like literally like almost touching the window with the daylight coming through it, it is so much brighter and you can use so many better settings for the camera. It's less shaky. It's got better depth of field. You can do all these different things with it. And that's an example, right? Learning one thing being applicable to many. But let's talk about like why it's important for beginners. The reason I think this is really for learning, like when you're learning a new skill, It is basically impossible to be an expertise in one thing without also learning what it's applicable to. Like, let's say you wanted to be a really great rigger, right? Like, I'm going to be just a niche expert rigger, and I'm going to work at Blizzard one day, and I'm just going to be good at rigging. Okay, well, if you're a student, you need to have a good portfolio to show off your rigging. And that means you need a good model, because if you don't know modeling, you don't have anything to rig. So you need to get a good model, and you need to rig it, and then you also need to animate it. So you need to give it to somebody who's going to be a good animator. So maybe a group of friends or whatever, right? The thing is you're relying now on other people. You're putting all your eggs in one basket. The chances of it failing is so much higher when you are relying on other people to put the quality and care into it, because you won't know. You'll just send your portfolio or your demo reel to companies and just get rejected. And maybe it's because, your rigging was amazing and all the technical details and everything there, but the mesh looked like a dog's breakfast. It was the worst mesh. It was all horrible. And maybe it was also based off terrible concept art. So the character itself was just like boring or whack, and it was all wrong. So because you were based off all these things and you didn't even know at the time that the model was wrong or that the concept art was wrong or whatever else, you just did what you are good at and you want to do, and it's rigging, and you don't know why you're not getting any calls, and it's because everybody else around you failed. Right? It's like an analogy for everything in life. It's like a ship, right? It doesn't matter if you've got like the best designed ship with like the best masts and the best crew and the captain and the person who stocked the food and everything else works. If you've got one hole in the boat, it's going down. Okay? One guy who didn't understand how nails work, and he just half-assed it while he was talking to his friend, and down goes the ship. So you are relying on other people to do the good things. And so that's why it's if you look at read books by film directors or listen to them in interviews and things, they're so interested in everything else, the writing and the storytelling and the director of photography and how that works and cameras. And, you've got Jon Favreau also learning in virtual production and Unreal Engine, because he wants to learn all the little things so that he knows how they interconnect. Because that's the other thing as well, is you can't become a good rigger without also understanding how a mesh works, right? Rigging is about deforming a mesh. So you have to know about topology, and you only learn about topology by modeling something and seeing where it breaks. And as well as that, what is a rig for? It's for animation. So if you don't know animation, you don't know what animators are actually going to be doing with the rig. You might just be putting a whole bunch of fancy stuff in it because it's going to look good for your reel, but it doesn't actually solve any problems, right? It doesn't have the controls that an animator would need, stretchy arms or something so they can break it for the shot, because that's so common, or a little control for the bulge in the bicep because otherwise it twists and it causes a problem when the arm is in this position. All these little things. So you won't know, because that you have to solve a problem for the animators, and how are you going to do that if you don't know what they're actually if they're actually going to put away? So it's basically impossible. That's what I'm saying. It's impossible. You can't be world class at something without also knowing at least a base knowledge of everything else. I really think that. Who's the best hard surface modeler in the world? It's probably Vitaly Bulgarov. At least he's probably the most well known. It's probably impossible to actually ever find who is the world's best X without, because he's probably he's based in some little tiny studio off in the world somewhere. He doesn't have a portfolio, but he's just amazing, and he's working with 5 other people, and they don't even know who he is or care. They just think all riggers are like that, but he's just the best rigger in the world, but he's just completely underplaying himself because he doesn't advertise or anything. So, but anyways, the most well-known is probably Vitaly Bulgarov. He's probably the best, well-known hard surface modeler. But he also knows detail hierarchy, shape language to make these beautiful robots with the square faces. He also knows lighting to present it in the right way, so that there's the reflection, that the catch light is there, and composition so that he can put it with other elements in a scene and it looks amazing. And all the things that come with photography and depth of field and all that. He has to know all those things. The only way he could create what he does without that would be to hire a team of artists around him in order to do those things at an acceptable level, and because he doesn't know those things himself, there's probably a higher chance that one of those areas would fail as well. So the point I'm trying to make is that's not happening. No one's doing that. No individual artist has a budget to hire other people around them to make stuff that looks good in their portfolio, unless you were to work at a world-class studio like Blizzard, Disney, all those kind of things. But again, those people also, I guarantee you, the people that are in Disney and they're just riggers, they also have gone through the process of making and modeling and texturing their own character, then rigging and then animating it and putting it into a shot. I guarantee you they all know at least basically how to do that. Before they were able to expertise and focus on rigging, at Disney. So anyways, there's a great, actually, a podcast with Scott Adams on the Tim Ferriss Show, episode 106. It's funny bringing up Scott Adams when I had the preamble of this episode talking about politics. I do not agree with everything Scott Adams says, okay? He is a very, very good and successful person in business, and he's just diversified and done so many different things, and he's just killing it. He's a really good thinker. He's a really good writer. Anyways, the point is in this episode with Tim Ferriss, he talks about skill stacking in episode 106, where he said, I'm not the best artist. I'm not the best cartoonist. I'm not the best writer. I'm not the best comedian. I'm okay, or I'm good at all three of those, okay? I'm maybe, I don't know, 10%, top 10% of the world of, let's say, cartoonists, let's say, speaking. Top 10% of the best writing or the best, written comedy or something like that. But because I'm good at that, and then also marketing, and I've learned how publishing works, and because I'm good enough at all of those categories, together, the skill stack is so high that the chances of me succeeding is much higher. So that's, I think that applies to, everything, directing, anything you want to get good at. It's a very good analogy, and it's very memorable. Finally, the other thing I'd recommend, again, from the Tim Ferriss podcast is episode 19. This was like a really old episode, but Tim Ferriss went really deep into the topic of jack of all trades, master of none. It's only 13 minutes long, but he sort of gives like an essay on why there's 5 reasons why he thinks it's better to be a jack of all trades. So if you want to delve deeper in that, if I haven't convinced you, give that a listen. And I hope that answers your question. Generalist. 9 times out of 10, I think that's the way to go. But if you're already really good, you've already got the basics down, you're really good, and you really just want to get a position at Naughty Dog or something, then yeah, I think that's where it really shines to sort of, lock into one thing and really delve into it. But you're not going to get there without knowing the other stuff. So now, very quick advert. Polygon. Polygon, Poliigon, is the company that I created to help 3D artists like yourself probably to become better. So to create better renders faster. Because I know that when you're creating a scene, when you're creating a render and you need stuff to look good, a lot of the problems and a lot of the time and effort that goes into creating this stuff is fixing issues with things that you were required to download in order to build it. So if you're building an office and you need a wooden floor, you got to find a wooden floor, right? And then you put it into the shot and you put other things into it and you're like, doesn't feel right. And then you're like, maybe it's the wood. And you zoom in and you're like, yeah, it's kind of blurry. And then you got to fix it. Or maybe the normal map was wrong. Or maybe there's not a displacement map. So you had to build your own displacement map. And you do that for all the textures and materials and the models and the things. And you end up spending so much time trying to fix it. And it's like, what if it just worked? What if you just downloaded it and it worked out of the box? That is the mission of Polygon. It is a really high quality asset library of photo scans and photo scan materials and all materials. We've got a whole bunch of different materials. So we actually just recently released Terrazzo and Marble. Terrazzo, if you don't know, it's the newest, hottest material in interiors and architecture across the world. All of the hottest cafes and hipster bars and dental offices, I don't know, have terrazzo, and it's something you can't find online. So we want to solve that problem for artists. So we actually built a generator, which is a substance file that has all the controls that you would ever need to customize and create whatever terrazzo you needed. So it's got, you can change the colors, you can change the sizes of the chips, you can change, whether it's in a tile pattern or this tile pattern with the diamonds or the chevron, all that kind of thing. Or it's just a flat slab. You can do everything with this one generator. That's available. But then there's also the actual materials themselves, like 40 to 50, I think, materials that if you just need something quick, you can just download one of them. So that is Polygon. That is my company. It is a team of artists that I trust and I know do amazing work so that you don't have to think about it and that your portfolio is going to look amazing and you don't have to worry about it. So Polygon, POLIIGON.com if that interests you. Okay, so we have a couple of questions left. This next question comes from a lady. Her name is Teun. Tuen? I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it. Let's hear your question.
Hi, I had a question. Next year for my college, I have to choose either 3D art or animation. Or something else, but I want to choose between those two, and I really want to become a VFX artist. Only I don't know which of the two will be best to choose if I later want to become a VFX artist, because we will learn 3D animation if you choose for animation, but you also learn a lot more about 3D in 3D art. So I don't know which of those two will be the best to choose. Could you help me out?
Yes, very good question, Tuen. Sorry. Very, very good question. And this is why I think it comes back to the question of like, do I recommend school or university to other people? We'll get to that in a future episode, but generally no. But I know you're keen on it and you're going to go. But like, here's like a perfect example. At your stage in your career where you don't know enough about the field, how are you possibly supposed to even choose not only the right school, but the right skills that you're going to be learning in order to get the job that you need? You're hoping that if you chose animation or you chose 3D art, that's going to be applicable to the thing. But so many people go through it and then they're like, oh, it was all about programming for game engines, and yet they advertised it as game design or something. So anyways, it's not, I know you just want an answer, but I just thought I'd get that off my chest. Okay. So you want to do VFX in the future. You want to work at a VFX studio. Your question is, should I do a course in 3D design or should I do a course in animation? I would say it depends on what you actually enjoy, because VFX does involve both. And as an example, Game of Thrones, if you're working on the dragon, then of course, and you're animating it for the shot and you're an animator, it needs to be animated, okay? But also, most VFX in most shots is invisible. You don't actually realize it, but like most of the movies you watch, any building that's in the background, even if they're just walking out onto the street, it's all like digital. They're just like adding stuff in. I actually did an interview with Barnstorm VFX co-founders. So they're a studio in LA. I believe they had 50 people. They work on TVs, movies. They did The Man in High Castle. They did a whole bunch of stuff. And they actually talk about like what we're looking for in students or people that apply for us. And he said like so much of it is like they had a shot where I think they were doing one for the show Silicon Valley, and a character steps out of like this old shack or something. And on set, yeah, they had this old shack, but it didn't look old and like worn down enough or whatever. So they wanted to make it look more poor. So they wanted to have a digital, like a washing machine just next to the door, like an old, like discarded washing machine next to the door. And so they had to add that in. And he said that is a perfect example of the sort of work that you would get as a VFX artist. You have to digitally create a washing machine. In this case, probably just download one from the internet and then destroy it in your texture painting and break the model or whatever it is. And then you have to embed that into the shot so that it feels a part of the shot. So you have to learn about focus, getting the right focus, the grain, and the levels. That was actually something that was, when I visited the studio, it was like, even in the bathroom, there was this sign that said focus, grain, levels. I'm like, And then I'm like walking down the stairs and there's like on the staircase, focus, grain, levels. I'm like, Go to the coffee machine, focus, grain, levels. I'm like, what is this focus, grain, levels? And he's like, we put that everywhere across the office because we think those are the three things that are most commonly wrong and are the most common feedback we give on shots is getting the focus right, the grain to match the grain of the camera, and the levels. Stuff like that. So anyways, I honestly, my advice would be, what do you enjoy? What do you want to do? Do you want to do character animation? Do you want to do the personality of the dragon from the Game of Thrones and the getting that motion? Do you want to do motion? Is that your kind of thing? Or you just want to do like VFX? Because that I think is a higher chance. Like, yes, animation is needed for a lot of movies and TV shows. Like Chappie, it was like motion capture, and a lot of that is animated, and a lot of game stuff is a lot of that's animated as well. But most of the stuff in VFX, it's as I said, throwing in a chair or a lamppost where it needs to be and embedding that into the shot, and that's kind of. It's entry level, I think, which I think is there's a higher chance of getting that job. So, in my opinion, if I were you. Let's say you don't know. You're like, I don't know, characters are kind of fun, but also I need to get a job. I need to make sure I get work, VFX. I would say just do 3D. Just 3D design, basics, fundamentals. And I think because that is a higher chance of learning the modeling and the lighting and also photorealism, how materials work and all that. I hope that your school is good. By the way, I would say this because now I'm talking about it. Check that your school is actually good. There's a website called The Rookies. If you just type in The Rookies into Google, it's the only school ranking system for artists, basically, that isn't paid and like biased and everything else. They basically have, they're actually based in Australia. That's how I know about it. But yeah, like they have industry professionals on their board and panel who actually review the artwork from students and judge whether or not they're ready to enter into the workforce. And so a school that has a poor ranking, it means a bunch of students came from there and they all had pretty terrible work, which means the school is not teaching the students well enough. So if your school is not on the Rookies or it ranks poorly, but if it's not on the Rookies, you want to ask them why, because that's a pretty telling sign as well. And if it's rating poorly, then I would also just give it a miss as well. Because look, this is expensive. This is an investment you need to make, and it is huge. You look very young. You don't realize how big of an investment this is. It might be free. Maybe you're European. I can't remember your accent. It might be free where you are, but that's not free either. Your country has to pay for it. So it's not good enough to just say like, but it's free where I live. It's like, well, you also need to hope that your school is actually churning out people who are entering a workforce, because if they're not, then the free schooling model is probably going to fall over on itself. So you need to make sure that you're not just going to a school because it's free and it doesn't matter. Like it does matter to your country and the system. So anyways, that would be my advice to you. And the final question, do we have another Bruno? Oh no, this is someone else. Brandon. Okay, here we go. This question is from Brandon, the final question for this podcast. Here we go.
Hey, Andrew. So my question is, in learning 2D, in the learning process of 2D, was there anything that you could take away from that skill set and apply it to your 3D art going forward? Like looking at shapes differently and whatnot, for example. Thanks.
Hell yeah, Brandon. That is a good question because, a lot of people want to know, like, is it worth learning 2D? How does it actually help you in 3D? Because I have gone through that. I've spent, basically 2 years of self-learning in a continuous fashion, sort of an hour every day going into it. Yes, there is loads. I would say the biggest thing though, aside from, learning proportions and like now when I, do something in 3D and I'm trying to match a reference, like I can just judge by my eye and get the measurements pretty well perfect because I've done so many, like thousands of drawings and getting the line in the wrong place that now I can get it a lot better and a lot closer than I used to. However, the biggest thing that I discovered is that realism is often boring. It does not create necessarily a good image. I remember I was doing this drawing of this girl, one of the many Instagram girls that I later learned it's not a good idea to use Instagram reference because like 99% of Instagram photos, it's flat lighting because that's what makes you look good. It hides all of the imperfections and the tiny details and the lines in the face and things. But it's really hard to draw that. It's hard to understand the form when things are lit flatly, and you need to understand the form. So anyways, I was doing this, this Instagram model and whatever, and I did it. I spent ages. I spent so many times like redrawing it and trying to do the right sketch, and then I do this thing where I then put on another layer, the reference, and I put it at like, I don't know, 10% opacity or something. I put it underneath it and I see where the lines are off, and I do it, and then I redraw it, and I try and I turn it off, and then I go, okay, let's check it, and I turn the layer back on, and then I go, okay, this line is off, and I turn it off, and then I do it again, and I eventually finished, and I went, oh, this is just bad. It still feels wrong, and then I turned on the layer, and I'm like, it's actually perfect. The lines are in the right place, and yet this is boring as hell. This character looks stiff and emotionless and lifeless, and I wouldn't post this anywhere. And then I remember a few months later probably doing some gesture sketches, which is basically exaggerating a pose. So you find a character who's in this sort of like looking up at the sky thing, and you sort of like, simplify the shape and exaggerate it. So move the arm in a more exaggerated way in this direction, and the back and the spine, and you sort of push that so the hips go to the left, and you take everything and you exaggerate it a little bit to get the right to tell the right story. You don't want to like do it incorrectly. It has to tell it correctly. And I was doing that, and I was doing these quick sketches, and then I decided, let's do some quick sketches of faces. Let's go back to those like Instagram ones. And I was doing these like quick, faster ones, like, and it was like 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that. You start really quick, and then you go like faster and faster through it. And I finished one, and the proportions were wrong, and yet it looked way better than anything that I'd done, getting the accuracy and the realism just right. And it was eye-opening to me because I realized, oh my God, realism sucks. Often. Realism it only looks as good as the reference you've got, and reference is often very boring. And what makes 2D look great, and what 2D artists I think are a lot better at because they're limited by their tool set. 3D artists have, nodes and rigs and displacement modifiers, and we go, ooh, and we dabble in all the things, and then we do it. Like an artist has like a pencil and a paper. They're forced to churn something out of it that looks decent, and to do that, they have to learn simplification. So I think what 2D is good at is simplifying things down to what makes that thing look like itself, and what is it about this pose that is actually interesting? Because you could draw that exact same pose and get it completely accurately done, and yet it'll look boring. And I want to clarify that accuracy is important to 2D, and I'm still planning on doing that episode about learning 2D, because I said I'm going to do like the full curriculum that I would give people who want to learn 2D, because I've learned all the mistakes and what is actually important. I'm going to do that. It's just going to take a while to put it all together because people have been asking about it. Proportions, getting things accurate is important, but because you need to make sure that when you're drawing even an exaggerated gesture shape, that you're stopping the line where it should logically stop, and not like extending the leg to be 3 times as long as it needs to. You need to know some proportions. You need to get that done. But in order to make a beautiful image, it's often simplification. I actually recently delved into FZD School. it's a YouTube channel, FZD School. I think it's Frank something design. Sorry, Frank Zeng Design maybe. It's based out of Singapore, and it's just the founder of the school, I believe, who is a concept artist, and he just breaks down things into a really interesting way. And I think one of his last few videos, they're like an hour long each, sort of a slideshow, and he talks about things. But he was talking about silhouettes or detail. I'll put the link in the show notes if you want to watch that video. But he was talking about this, and he was like looking at reference and saying like, what is wrong with like replicating real life? And he said that it can be too much. Too much can actually take away from creating an appealing image. So he had like this reference of like these pots and pans and things, and there's like a cooking stove. Like if you wanted to make like a cooking stove and show that it's a cooking stove, like for like a Wild West sort of environment, campfire and everything, like a cooking stove with some pots and pans, he said there's too much detail here. There's too much going on. You've got so many shapes. You've got like 5, 6 pots and pans. They're all about the same size. They're all sort of conflicting with each other. You maybe need 1 and 2 that are sort of like different, unique shapes, and then like some medium-sized ones, and then some smaller ones. And the viewer will know looking at it what it's supposed to be, and it'll look closer. It'll resemble that thing often more than the realistic thing. This was the thing that blew my mind. I can't remember where I learned it, perhaps in a caricature course, but he was basically talking about exaggeration. And in World War II, the soldiers that are on the ground that are sort of operating the anti-aircraft artillery, like the flak guns or whatever, they need to know what plane it is up in the air, because then they'll know what speed it's traveling at. And because they have to basically see where it is in the sky. I didn't know this, but there's a whole video talking about like how flak worked, anti-artillery. That's fascinating in its own right. But anyways, like when they fire the thing, like, you know, in the movies that the plane's flying through the air, and there's like poof, 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 poof. There's like these black clouds around it. That's flak. So it would it'd be like 45 seconds after they fired the thing before it would actually hit where they think the plane is going to be. So there's like all these, the training video for pilots on how to like change direction at just like zigzag in just the right random interval so that the gunner can never actually correctly guess where the plane is going to be. It's fascinating. Anyway, I diverged on a crazy point there. The point is they had to give a chart to the gunner to show him what the planes look like in the sky from where you are and what type of plane it is. This one's a B-20, this one's a whatever. And they actually exaggerated the shapes. So I don't know what planes are. I think they're in the sky sometimes. Not anymore. It's COVID. I don't know. I can't identify planes. I don't know the names. But let's say it was like a B-20. And its key characteristic is like long wings, right? They actually drew the wings longer than they actually were. If this plane had like a thick body, they drew it thicker than it actually was. And you think like, why would you do that, right? You might confuse him, or you might like, maybe he thinks, oh, that's not the right one. The thing is, when you're looking at a chart and you're looking up the thing, your brain is actually comprehending things in a different way than your eyes are. I mean, I guess that's kind of the best way to say it. So the plane that like, as you're looking at the plane, if like the wings are like a long plane is like that, and then another one is like this, your brain, if it was drawn realistically, you might actually confuse the plane type because the wings are so similar in the chart. But if it is exaggerated slightly, your brain is going like, yeah, the wings are the key feature, the long feature. So I say all that as an example to say that, our realism is often more complicated than it needs to be, and it can actually detract from the real thing. So that was a thing that I learned. I also... That's why I said in an episode a while ago, I think it's on YouTube, the snippet, why I don't think 3D artists, I don't think 2D artists or any artist should learn stylization or exaggeration first. I think this is sort of related to it, but yeah, you won't know what to exaggerate yet. Like, it's an important skill, but I think you have to learn what the real thing looks like first in order to exaggerate it. I know I've just talked about like why exaggeration is key and everything, but I also think that you won't know it until you know what everything looks like, and you've learned to draw legs at the correct length for such a long amount of time, and you've got proportions, and you've figured it out, that now when you look at a face or a leg or a person, you can actually realize what makes that thing unique, and then you can exaggerate and stylize it. So anyways, that's the key thing that I've taken away from 2D Brandon. So that episode's coming soon. It's going to be on how to learn 2D if that interests you. So thank you all for making it through this long and very unique episode with a interesting intro to this episode. Thank you all for listening. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Help to outweigh the people going to give it a thumbs down. And subscribe on iTunes, give it 5 stars, and help other people find this podcast. If you have a question for the next podcast where I do these question and answer things, please send it to blenderguru.com/podcast question. So you enter into your browser, and then you'll see a Dropbox folder, and you need to upload your video question. So I want to be able to see your face, and all you have to do is your phone. You don't have to get a DSLR or anything fancy or webcam. Hold up your smartphone, it's good enough, put it on selfie mode, hit record, and in 30 seconds say, "Hey, I'm Marvin from Idaho, America. Where you're from? This is my question. How do I do X," or whatever, in 30 seconds. And the clearer the question, the more interesting it is going to be for other people, then the better it is. So that's how you can do it. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you in a future episode. Bye.